Welcome to the Holocaust Centre. I'm Sue Hampel. I first met Tali nearly 20 years ago on my first trip to Poland. Little did I know that our encounter would turn into a lifelong friendship, so I'm happy to welcome Tali back to Australia. Tali is the founder and director of the Johannesburg Holocaust and Genocide Centre. She has lectured internationally on Holocaust education and genocide and human rights. Tali has presented at numerous conferences. She was actually in the United Nations. She actually spoke at the United Nations in November last year. She's published many, many articles. She's been quoted and acknowledged in lots of documentary films. Tali also serves on the Academic Advisory Board on the School of Social Sciences at Monash University, South Africa. She was chosen as one of the top 100 newsworthy and notable women in South Africa. She was even interviewed by the Oprah magazine, and there's a story about her in the Oprah magazine. I have a copy of the article if you want to read it. I bought it. But most of you are here, and most of you know Tali, because she is the most amazing and wonderful and compassionate guide on March of the Living. And she has led numerous Australians, I think about 150 Australians you've taken on the adult March of the Living. And Tali's interest, and some would say obsession, with the Holocaust is because her parents were Holocaust survivors. In fact, her father and uncle were saved by Oskar Schindler. So it is with absolute pleasure to welcome Tali to the Holocaust Centre tonight to speak to you about Holocaust remembrance and education, the complexities and challenges of facing the past in South Africa.
It is so nice to be in a room full of friends. I feel as if I'm in the lounge of my house, and I'm seeing, I'm inviting sort of 60 of my closest friends for dinner. And if you're not my friends yet, I hope you'll be my friends by the end of this evening, and that we can have perhaps is there tea or something? Yeah. We can go for tea somewhere else after. But it is really wonderful to be here tonight, and I really want to thank everyone here at the Jewish Holocaust Centre for inviting me. I came to, here's Andrew, hello Andrew. So we really, let me really share with you how come I'm here and how come I'm so happy to see so many friends from March of the Living, from the Holocaust education, fraternity, colleagues, friends. Where's Warren? He disappeared. Here's Warren, co-director of an institution. Really a lot of friends, and of course Holocaust survivors. Henry, wonderful to have you. I'm not sure if other Holocaust survivors are here, but I do want to acknowledge the Holocaust survivors that are here. In a way, they are the raison d'etre of what we do. So, I was invited to come to Sydney, to the University of Sydney, to take part in a very, very interesting conference that took place for 3 days at the sister sort of organization to yours, the Sydney Jewish Museum, and at the University of Sydney. And they invited me, they paid for my trip, and I said, wonderful, Sydney is a nice place in summer, I'm sure I can go, but I cannot come to Australia without visiting Melbourne and without visiting my friends. So I decided to add 3 days, just 3 days here, and come and see you all, and to share with you a little bit of the vision and the work that we're doing in South Africa, because it is a long journey that took me to where we are today. And I have some witnesses that saw some of the journey. Tessa here was an intern with us 2 years ago and saw some of the journey, but we are progressing with this journey all the time, and I think it's a very interesting journey to hear about when you are here in Melbourne. So I thought I will come and I will share with you some of those insights and thoughts, some of the materials that we work with, and why. What is the complexity? Some of you are perhaps from South Africa or visited South Africa. So why is it complex? How do we teach the Holocaust and genocide in South Africa? some of those rationale of how do we do things and how do we developing our thoughts. And all I can hope for is that we will have also a conversation. So I'm going to share with you some ideas, a few clips of films that we developed, and then we'll open it for a discussion and a conversation. And again, it's just really, thank you, it's really, really wonderful to be here amongst friends. So, as you heard, I founded the Johannesburg Holocaust and Genocide Centre. Really the idea or the dream started in 2008. The idea was that the Holocaust became a compulsory part of the education or history education of South Africa. I'll tell you a bit more about that. And yet, we had no centre in Johannesburg. Johannesburg is the largest city in South Africa, the economic hub of South Africa, but indeed of Africa. And it is the largest Jewish population in South Africa, about 55,000 Jews, yet there was no Holocaust Centre at all in the country. Let me just tell you that the difference between South Africa and Australia is that many survivors came to Australia after the war. And you all know that this centre was established by survivors. The Sydney Centre was established by survivors. South Africa blocked immigration. In 1930, they blocked immigration from Eastern Europe in what was then the Quota Act. And in 1937, they blocked immigration from Germany and Austria. And actually, there were some refugees that came in until 1936, about 3,000 from Germany. But during the war years, only 220 Jews managed to come to South Africa. And after the Holocaust, only about 300 survivors came to South Africa. So we're talking about tiny number of survivors, and many of them went to Cape Town, or to Bloemfontein, or to Durban. Some came to Johannesburg. So we are not a collection place of artifacts, we just spoke about it. We are really a community that is mainly 1920s immigration. The connection to the Second World War is very brief. South Africa fought on the side of the Allies, very much like Australia, in North Africa, in Italy. You know what is really interesting though, and something that maybe you don't know? It was South African pilots, Squadron 60 and Squadron 30, that took the very famous aerial photographs of Auschwitz-Birkenau. Can you all sort of imagine those aerial photographs? You see all the barracks, and later on the CIA analysts in the 70s found out that you can actually see people walking to the crematorium, actually crematorium 2 and 3. These were taken by South African pilots. Okay, so the connection is little, not much connection. So why in South Africa we created this? We created the Johannesburg Holocaust and Genocide Centre, the largest such centre in all of Africa. Almost 4,000 square meters, 3 levels, many exhibitions, many seminars, seminar room, resource centre. Why in Johannesburg? Not many survivors, very little connection to our history. Why a centre there? So perhaps through the next picture, I will explain to you something that is interesting. First of all, in South Africa, you have 3 centres, and you can see them here. There is a centre in Cape Town, and I think Ada, you visited, and I think Tessa, you too. And there is a centre in Durban, and we are the last one, the newest one. In South Africa, there are only 70,000 Jews, or 75,000 Jews, population of 53 million. Why 3 centres in South not one, 3. And why we managed to work together. In other words, we're not competing against each other. We created an umbrella organization that is called the South African Holocaust and Genocide Foundation, one foundation that has 3 centers that are independent, but are also working together. Why? Very simply, because we have to support 600,000 teachers in teaching the Holocaust, in teaching about genocide. And that is not an easy task. It's not an easy task because the teachers, the majority of the teachers, have no knowledge, no prior knowledge about these topics. They don't, most of them, know who is a Jew, what is to be a Jew. They don't know about Europe. For example, we do an education activity with maps and saying, well, we're going to learn about the Holocaust, so let's look at the scene of the crime, you know, CSI, all those things. And they look at the map of Europe, and they don't know where is Germany or where is Poland. But you know what? Most of them don't know where is Rwanda. When I share with our education, when our education specialists or facilitators share a map of Africa, most of them do not know where Rwanda is. So I will talk a little bit about that. So we created 3 centers in South Africa, but one center, that again another view of our center, that we decided not to call a museum, but to call a center of education, of memory, of education, and where lessons for humanity can be learned. And the idea is, and I'll talk a little bit about the concept of the building, because I said to you, I started with a dream in 2008. How did we get to this? The idea was really to create a center of education, a place where those teachers can learn how to teach, and where the students can learn about genocide. And I'll use the word genocide in a way to encompass everything also that happened in Rwanda, in Namibia, Herero and Nama genocide, in Africa around us, neighboring countries around us, and to learn about all that. The center, as I said to you, really started with a dream. Because when few of us gathered together in the beginning, we didn't know what we want to create. Should we do just a little office and do outreach programs? So we should go to schools and to teachers and teach them. Should we maybe do a resource center? We didn't know. Then the city of Johannesburg came to us and said to us, do you want to partner? And we said yes. And then they said, okay, let's show you sites around the city, because we would like to partner with you and create something a little bit bigger. They showed me 5 sites in the city. And the one site was this. Other sites were in other places. Now, for you to understand this site, because I don't know if many of you visited Johannesburg, it's really the heart of Johannesburg. It is next to all the other important museums, the Military Museum, Alliance Française, the Goethe Institute, the University of the Witwatersrand, the main university campus of the country, next to the zoo, next to the lakes, next to everything. And a beautiful, beautiful site. So we said, fine, how much, what do we need to do? And they said, no problem. You sign a lease for 70 years, and you'll have to pay us, let me translate very quickly, $40, Australian dollars, a year for 70 years. Warren is giggling and moving to Johannesburg now. And this will be an agreement between us. We will also help you to get all the permits, and we will cover all that, rezoning, permissions, and all that. We'll even connect you to the power grid. That was quite a big thing because we didn't have power for a little while. And then they said, but you will have to fundraise for this. So this is the partnership. We will give you the land, great land, but you will have to fundraise for it. Now, I'm not sure, and that was in 2010. Meanwhile, we were doing a lot of outreach programs and starting to be established and hiring 1 or 2 people. We started to say, okay, let's do it. Let's find an architect. Let's start planning it. And let's start fundraising. So we went crazy, actually, because the way we did it was, we started to build before we had the money. We were really actually quite, when I think about it now, I don't know how I slept at night. I really don't. But we were so full of enthusiasm and with a commitment to get it done, that we managed to get commitments quite quickly, within the first 2 years. And by 2012, we started to dig, demolish the sites that was there were buildings and dig and so on. And this building was finished last year, 2016, more or less. We still have some little finishes, but it was finished last year. And we moved in March, April of last year. So from a dream to a reality was a journey, but a very, very interesting journey. And I want to just, before I move on, talk to you for 2 seconds about the symbolism of the building. Because when you build from scratch, you are in an existing building, I think, okay, with additions. I'm looking at all of you. But when you build from scratch a memorial, it's not a memorial site, nothing happened in that site. It is in a country far away that was an ally, but didn't happen where we are. How do you build it? What representation do you use? And the architect, Louis Levine, a local architect, a very institutional architect. He was part of the constitutional court of the country, the main theater, the new theater in Soweto, very interesting piece, very interesting theater building, and many other institutions, synagogues and schools, and the science museum. Louis and myself said, well, where do you start? You start with the survivors. That's the reason I'm saying the survivors. You go to the survivors, you call the survivors in, and we had workshops with the survivors, also with the Rwandan survivors, and with many, many others, teachers, learners, I want to say students, and ask them, if we're creating a building, what this building should look like. What should be the symbolism of this building? If you had to, and I'm asking you now, if you had to think of a symbol of the Holocaust, just one symbol that can be done in bricks and concrete and steel, what will that symbol be, do you think? Anyone can think what the survivors said. I mean, you can see it here as well. What will that be? The rails, the trains, the cattle trucks. Because the experiences of survivors were many. People were in hiding, people were in ghettos, people were in camps, people were everywhere. But majority of them had some experience of dislocation and movement, or deportation. Other survivors of Rwanda, of other teachers, students said, you know, the railway line, and you see the building has 10 meters high real railway line in concrete and stone, embedded in the concrete and stone. And the symbols of the buildings are harsh. They're harsh, they're industrial. Because other survivors said, yeah, the railway lines. Because the railway lines are a symbol of modernity, of progress, but also they were a symbol of oppression. They were a symbol of using manpower, of the mines, of moving people around. So we had a symbol. And those railway lines that are surrounding the building are very, very powerful. There are many, many symbols that are in the building. But as I said, the building is harsh. You know, it's done by very harsh materiality: brick, concrete, stone, steel, glass. The brick is laid in a system, the British Empire system, that is called English bond. What is English bond bricklaying? It is when you lay it like that, like that, like that, like that. It's strong. I don't know, there are architects here, so probably know what I'm talking about, but it is double strength, and it is that kind of brick that is symbolizing power, empire, but it's also the type of brick that the gas chambers of Auschwitz is built out of. So if you will look back to your pictures, for my friends here from the March of the Living, and you will look at Auschwitz I, the barracks in Auschwitz I, that we all visited, and if you'll go and see some of the remains of Birkenau, of the gas chambers, and the sauna building, it's all in English bond. So you have again this beauty and empire and modernity of the 17th century or 18th century, together with this oppression, genocide, and killing, and so on. And there are many, many, many other symbols that I'm very happy to talk to you about them. I think the building is very, very powerful. Very, very powerful. The minute we opened our doors, not even a year ago, it's just about 10 months ago, the school started to come. This is one of our first schools. You know that we did not have chairs yet. We did not have chairs yet. And they wanted to come, and, well, they sat on the floor, you know. And the school started to come, and the adult group started to come, and the student group started to come from universities. Because in the high school system of South Africa, and I'm not sure if it is exactly the same in Australia, but in South Africa, the Department of Education, not the Jewish community, not me, not Richard Friedman, not others, the Department of Education decided in 2007 to include the study of the Holocaust as a compulsory study in the curriculum. Not for 1 or 2 hours, but in the grade 9, that is 15 years old, for 15 hours, all of the first term. And it's a good curriculum. Starts with the rise of Nazis, through the Warsaw Ghetto, through the uprising, some resistance, the final solution, and so on. And if you choose history again, because in South Africa you can choose math, biology, whatever, but if you choose it again, you do it again in grade 11, that is 17 years old. So they come. So the teachers are coming. I can tell you, last week we finished a workshop of 8 hours training teachers in Soweto, and there were 58 teachers that came for that workshop. We give resources, they learn, and you ask yourself, but why the Holocaust? Why the Department of Education decided with our past, apartheid past, human rights past, racial past, why to teach the Holocaust? The Holocaust happened 70 odd years ago in another continent. South Africa wasn't really involved, so why? That is why. That is why, because it's difficult to teach about apartheid. Because it's too close. And we do have Apartheid Museum, and we have Lily's Leaf, and we have beautiful Constitution Hill, we have beautiful museums. And in Cape Town, beautiful Robben Island, District 6, beautiful museums. But somehow the kids have apartheid fatigue. They do not want to learn about apartheid again. They have to, because it is in the curriculum. So the way the Department of Education did it is quite clever. You start to learn in the grade 8, when you are 14, you end the year with the First World War, and in between the two wars, you start the next year with Versailles, and then Weimar and then Nazism, so it says a little bit to you. And then you speak about the Holocaust. And then you speak about 1945, the world learned, yes, sure, the world learned about human rights. And the United Nations was established. And in 1948, the United Nations passed the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. And a day after that, or before that, they passed the Convention for the Prevention and Punishment of Genocide. Raphael Lemkin, the coining of the word, and so on. South Africa abstained from both those decisions. Why? Because in 1948, apartheid starts in South Africa. So the thought process is learn about the Holocaust to understand how South Africa was going another direction. Then learn about apartheid. So in a way, the Holocaust is an entry point. I don't know if you get the thought process of the Department of Education in South Africa, the Ministry of Education, is to say, learn about the Holocaust, to allow you to understand apartheid better. Apartheid was not genocide, so you have to remember that. So they come, the educators come to our workshops. We have a lot of spaces that we can work in Cape Town, in Durban, in Johannesburg, and we train thousands and thousands of teachers. There is also in the curriculum space to speak about other genocides, and I want to introduce to you why we decided to create a Holocaust and genocide. The exhibitions are not together, they're side by side, but why not to say that in 1945 we learned and the genocide never happened again, and why we're going into Africa and so on. So let's have a look. At the moment, our permanent exhibition is not yet in. We are using a lot of temporary exhibitions, and we do a lot of work around different topics. So I wanted to bring one exhibition that we did that is interesting because it's of our friend Leora Khan and Proof Media for Social Justice. It's an exhibition about child soldiers. And majority of child soldiers are in Africa. And it is okay to learn about the Holocaust and to learn about apartheid, but what we chose to do is to also try to touch on issues that are problematic today and just shine a light on them through temporary exhibitions. So this is one of them. Another exhibition that is very, very successful, that is still with us at the moment, and these are some of the spaces, the windows. I can tell you a lot about the windows because the windows are amazing. You can see them on the left. All our spaces are with wood, trees. There are lots of symbolism, again, architectural symbolism. But both our permanent exhibition space and our temporary exhibition space, both are very large spaces, have windows because we want to say the Holocaust did not happen in darkness. It happened during the day. And there were neighbors that were watching while it was happening. And Rwanda in 1994 happened when CNN was showing it live, in color. And we watched, and we're watching now, of course, atrocities wherever they are. So for us, the windows are very important because we want the commentary all the time to say, it happened. What am I missing now under my nose that I need to say, I learned the lesson. I want to make some connection. Not comparisons, connections. We are all about connections, never comparing. None of our stuff is comparison. So let's look at this exhibition. This exhibition is really interesting. Speak about it a little bit. There are two exhibitions there. One is about the stepsister of Anne Frank. We all heard of Anne Frank. Eva Schloss, her father was Otto Frank, and Otto Frank, after losing his first family, was married to Eva's mother, actually for longer than he was married to Edith Frank. For 31 years they were married, until his death. So Eva is not so known. And of course it's very known, but Eva is not so known. So we created an exhibition about Eva's story, because Eva, and the exhibition is called The Promise, made a promise to her brother Heinz that did not survive, to remember him. And she felt that she failed him. He was an artist, he was a poet, she had a lot of his work. She felt that she failed him because Anne is remembered, his stepsister, but Heinz is not remembered. So she published a little book about Heinz, and then she gave us permission to create an exhibition that was created in South Africa. It's now touring in England, and it's called The Promise. And it shows the drawings that Heinz did until the age of 15 in hiding. Amazing drawings, amazing poems. That of course he did not survive. He was killed at the age of 17 and did not survive. So we had that exhibition. The next exhibition is quite interesting because it is called Germany's Confrontation with the Holocaust in the Global Context. Many times in our exhibitions we end in 1945, maybe 46, maybe 48. Maybe we end with the survivors and how they are in Australia or in South Africa, how they built their life. But what happened in Germany after 1945? How did they remember or didn't remember? So we did an exhibition that is really interesting because it looks at Germany and how did they confront their difficult past. Because in the beginning it was silence, and then it was amnesia, and then there was justice because there were trials. And then many years later, 50 years later, memorials started to come. How many of you were in Germany, visited Berlin, or some people? Yeah, nice, good. So do you remember like memorials, very moving? And in other places also, there's the Stoppelsteiners in Austria, in Czech Republic, in Hungary even. So countries are facing their past, but 60 years later. So that was really interesting. And why was it interesting? Because we are struggling to face our past. Our children don't want to learn about our past. In the universities now, in the last year and a half, there is a movement that's saying, you know, it started with Rhodes Must Fall, and now it's other movements. But the idea is, why are we celebrating still Verwoerd or apartheid heroes? What about learning about our difficult past, our racism, our issues? So we took Germany and the Holocaust to look at our own past. And it works. And actually, Ahmed Kathrada, that was in prison for 26 years on Robben Island and in other prisons in Cape Town, Kathy Kathrada, that was very close friend of Nelson Mandela, and he actually wrote on Robben Island chapters from the diary or entries from the diary of Anne Frank. They smuggled the diary to Robben Island, and Kathy, Ahmed Kathrada, actually wrote chapters of the diary of Anne Frank. And he said, it gave us strength. It allowed us hope. But it's amazing, a story of a 15-year-old in hiding in Amsterdam. These are political prisoners, 27 years in solitary confinement, and it gives them hope. The past that we are facing is not only the past of 20 years ago or 25 years ago. The past is last Friday. Where are we now? Thursday. Last week, Friday, there were xenophobic violence, xenophobic looting of shops of Somalis and Nigerians in the heart of Johannesburg. There was a protest on Thursday.
Things became really bad in Germany or in my hometown. We were not allowed to go to the swimming pool. My mother wasn't allowed to go to theater or to cinema. And we were restricted. And unbelievably, on the 9th of November, as you all know, we had Kristallnacht, called Kristallnacht because of all the crystal and glass which was smashed in the town, in the individual homes or flats. And they started burning down the synagogue next door to us. My father's praxis was completely destroyed, and my father was arrested in the morning. Consequently, my mother heard that there were Kindertransports going to England, just for the children, no parents, nobody, and somehow or the other she decided to send my brother and me to England, not knowing where we would land or who would look after us, just to get us out of Germany. We were only allowed a little suitcase, anything which we could carry ourselves. So we went by train to Holland. We were put on the boat, and I can't really remember very much because I must have fallen asleep. And in the morning, we were woken up and were taken either by bus or train to London. I think the newspapers or maybe the BBC broadcasted that there had so and so many refugees and they need home. And whoever could take a child, they would be very grateful.
The advance guard of the first 5,000 Jewish and non-Aryan child refugees from Germany will be provided with a temporary home here. Coaches take them to camp at Dovercourt.
I got to London and we were all set down. Some children were fetched and met, and I remained sitting by myself. I had an experience that a parson came to me and gave me a doll, and I was so thrilled to have a doll again. And he said he'll take me to Reading. And I said, what about my brother? I wanted to be with my brother, a promise which my mother had made us obey because she said we two must be kept together. And I've got a card from my mother where she says, we're being transported tomorrow to Theresienstadt. She wrote, she hears Theresienstadt is not one of the worst camps, and we mustn't give up hope. They will see us again. Many nights I lay awake and I thought, won't be long, the war must stop and, be over. It took much longer than I thought. Unfortunately, the bad news came. The Red Cross just said killed in Auschwitz, and to me that, was enough.
So you take those stories and you create a connection. I call it a connection to what is happening in your own country's history. So if it was in Australia, what is happening here with immigrants, with migration, with whatever connection is applicable to you, just to make that connection between history that happened 70 years ago and between today. What I want to go through very quickly with you, and I do have one more film, hopefully it will work, but is that we do it in different programs. And our education initiative is very, very important. And that's the reason I chose to call the talk tonight Memory and Remembrance and Education, because education is key. It's very, very important. And actually, when you walk into our center, the words of Primo Levi says, it happened, therefore it can happen again. This is the core of what we have to say. It happened and it can happen everywhere. And the tragedy is that it does. Not exactly the same, not with the same events or unique events or different events, but it happens and people still suffer. So what we try to do is to go through different examples that I will give you just to show you how we use education specifically on the issue of choices. Choices of individuals, of governments, of communities, in saving, in persecuting, in collaborating, in resisting. And we look through the Holocaust, that is a rich and an amazing way to understand this concept, difficult concept, and get it, and get that you hope that we will learn from it, if there is a way to do that. So let's try and do that. So we look at different choices through school kids, but also the defense force camp. So, for example, the army is sending all their peacekeepers that are going then to the Great Lake area to be in the DRC and in Uganda and in Burundi now that is a bit burning, and Rwanda, to look at choices and how can they play a role in all that. Why did we choose Rwanda? And I want to go a little bit, our center is looking at genocide in the 20th century. I mentioned already the Herero and Nama genocide in Namibia. Also, we touched on Armenia. The Holocaust is a key historical, a case study that we're looking at from all sides and with our own survivors. But why Rwanda? And Rwanda, of course, happened in 1994, in April 1994. But in April 1994, another thing happened. And that was our democratic elections. The same month, the same days. While Mandela became our first president, democratically elected president, 3.5 hours flight away from us, direct flight every day, okay? Genocide was happening on big screens, on CNN. And what did we do in South Africa? Nothing. Where was the media? At us. They were not in Rwanda. You had very few journalists that were in Rwanda. And in 100 days, 3 months, almost 1 million Tutsi and moderate Hutu, some Twa, were killed. No one intervened. Where was the world? Where was the UN? Did they call it genocide? No, because if you call it genocide, you have to intervene. So you don't call it genocide. Because there is a convention now, I talked about the convention, you have to intervene. You don't call it genocide, you don't have to intervene. So no one goes. And I am interested in Africa. So I'm interested, did the African Union intervene? No. Who was the heads of the UN? It wasn't the West. It was Boutros Ghali, that was from Egypt, and Kofi Annan, that was from Ghana. They did not intervene. So we need to make those connections. Government made very different choices. South Africa is one story, Rwanda is another. My personal story, and many of you know it, but I have to bring the personal story, is of my father. So the middle is my father, immediately after the war. Oscar Schindler, of course, that we all know, and the list, and my father, Moses Turner, and my uncle Henrik Turner is on page 10 of the list, and I believe that you have it downstairs, so look at page 10 and find my father. That is the ultimate choice, story that we start with. Because the reality is that Oster Schindler did not start as a rescuer. He started as a perpetrator. Nice, humid, nice guy perpetrator, but perpetrator nonetheless. So he came to Krakow, he took a factory, he didn't pay for it, he had slave labor, didn't give them salaries. He was a perpetrator. Didn't kill anyone, but was a perpetrator. But he moved. He moved and he changed. And in the end, of course, he saved. And he doesn't need to be a saint. It's not about sainthood. We're not giving, prizes and what do you call those? Hellos. It's not about that. It's about the choice that we can make and the changes that we can make. So we use, just to end, I want to just show you what we use as kind of examples, and it's different artifacts that we have and different photographs that we have in our collections. So artifacts such as the train tickets. Carol, you and Emmanuel, of course, know those train tickets from Salonika that were sold to the Jews to go to Auschwitz and their death. So to look at who is a perpetrator. Is it just Adolf Hitler or Heinrich Himmler or Goebbels or Mengele, or is it the person that designed the ticket, that printed the ticket, that sold the tickets? What about the person that made the hole in the ticket, stamped the ticket? There is a chain of perpetration, and we try to go a little bit deeper into that. What we do that is really different, and I really hope that this works, and it's very short, it's about 2 minutes, is that we look at perpetrators also in our exhibition and in our education system. We have a lot of survivors, eyewitness and testimonies, lots. But what we did is we filmed perpetrators and we filmed bystanders. And we want to bring those voices that we will try and get how and ask those very difficult questions. So this is from Rwanda. We filmed 8 perpetrators. I'm going to show you one and see what he says. Hopefully it works.
Nari umwe mu bayobozi b'urwego rw'ibanze mu mujyi wa Kigali nyobora segiteri Nyakabanda. Nkaba rero nashishikarije abanyarwanda kwica abatutsi mu gihe cya jenoside muri 1994. 12 unteganya ko nk'ibihumbi 8 cyangwa se 9 baguye muri iyo segiteri. Ntabwo nigeze ngira uruhare mu kwica, ariko mu gushishikariza abantu mu gutegura iyo gahunda yo kwica, ndumva ari ngiye waba uri ku isonga, kuko iyo nza kumera nk'ubirwanya ndumva nta kiba cyarabaye.
Mbere zaraje ndumva atari ibanga.
Ubundi hariho gahunda yo kuvuga ko umututsi agiye kutwambura ubutegetsi twebwe abahutu. Biba ngombwa rero ko habaho ko na leta kuko imera nk'idushyigikira, kuko ntawigeze ahanirwa icyo kintu, cyane cyane ko ibyo bintu bikoze nabitekereje nabigambiriye. Guru n'igihano ngomba kucyakira, kuko wari uyoboye guverinoma, tuvuge ko yaratuye mu Kiyovu, cyane ntuye mu Nyakabanda. Ese yaraje ampereza imbunda, ampereza umupanga, ampereza iki cya gutema wa mukecuru duturanye? Icyaha ni gatozi ku muntu.
So this is one, because there are others that will say, my elders told me to do it, so I did it. Or another one will say, the government told me. It was legal. It was legal, so I did it. I looted, I burned. So you start sort of engaging with that it's very difficult, to engage with a perpetrator, but you almost have to understand how is it possible that humanity does it and does it again. I remember the first perpetrator I met in Rwanda. I go often to, also you went, and Tessa, you went. First time I met a perpetrator, he killed many, and he was released after 10 years in prison. And we had someone translating for us, and he said to me, the first one was difficult. I'll never forget these words. The first one was difficult. What does it mean about us? If we say that. So it's important to engage with difficult subjects. What is also very crucial to engage with is the bystanders. Because it's a minority of perpetrators, and hopefully minority of victims. But bystanders, we are all bystanders. At one time or another, we are all bystanders to something. I'm definitely. So we need to look at who is a bystander and who were the bystanders. This picture from the United States Holocaust Memorial Museum from Amsterdam is very powerful because you have the teacups, the coffee cups. I'm having coffee, I'm looking at deportation of Jews to Westerbork and then to Sobibor or Auschwitz, and I have my coffee. It's the middle of the day, it's not in darkness, it's not hidden. And I go and I wash my cup and I continue my life. So we do need to look at who is a bystander. Primo Levi, that I very much think that, the philosopher of this period, said very important saying. In spite of the varied possibilities for information, most Germans didn't know because they didn't want to know, because they wanted not to know. And I can tell you as a South African that lives in Johannesburg, that thousands of South Africans living in Johannesburg next to the prisons and the torture chambers didn't know. They didn't know because we didn't want to know. We don't ask the questions, so we don't know. So this is very, very important for us to drive in the bystander. Of course, we have to celebrate the rescuers, the righteous amongst the nations. We have to. And the way they're growing, there are more than 26,000 recognized by Yad Vashem. It's growing. Do you have in Melbourne a righteous amongst the nations? Yeah. So it's amazing. He is from South Africa, Jaap van Proestig. He's from the Netherlands. He was a young lawyer, 21 years old, when he started to save. He actually died a few years ago as well. And Jaap forged papers, and he saved about 150 people. He was actually crazy because he forged a baptismal stamp in wax, and the Germans would not accept anything else but his forgery. So, like, when you really go far, 21 years old, crazy. In any case, Jaap, that was amazing. I once asked him, I said, Jaap, why did you do it? And he looked at me as if I'm absolutely crazy, and he said, what do you mean? If you will be here in St. Kilda Beach, and you see someone drowning, surely you will jump and save that man or woman or child. So I'm really not a good swimmer, so I'm not sure that I will. And I don't think I will. I will say, Henry, you go, and you jump and save, because for him it was clear. You do it. So what we need to do is to make it more clear, this story. So we do teach quite a lot about the upstanders or the rescuers of the righteous amongst the nation, but we of course dedicate a lot of time to the survivors, to the victims. And when you talk about choices, you also have to speak about dilemmas, choices, like Henry's mother that have to save him, and how will she, who she'll trust and not, and those very difficult choices. Choiceless choices, Lawrence Langer termed. The story of Abba Kovner is a very famous one. Maybe many of you know of him being this hero of the resistance in Vilna, the partisans. But years later, of course, he tells the story in Israel when he comes he started Bet HaTfutzot and kibbutz, and he tells the story that, when he was about to leave the ghetto in Vilna and join and go with the partisans to the forest, he came to say goodbye to his old mother. And his mother begged him not to leave her. She said she's scared, she's afraid, and please don't leave me, I don't want to be alone. And he left her. And he said, so was I the hero of the resistance, or was I the coward that abandoned his mother when she needed me most? those horrible dilemmas and choices that how do we even, because the Holocaust is unprecedented. It's so enormous that you have to go and share those stories to make it clear that it wasn't easy, that it was luck, and it was, it was to be in the right place in the right time, like my father that was on the list, but my grandmother wasn't, and she was killed, she was murdered in Belgium with my 2 aunts. And we are finishing, so really what I want to finish and then have a conversation, hopefully, if you have the time, is to look at this never again that we usually throw. When we say never again after the Holocaust, never again, but it's never again until the next time. It's never again until it's different never again, In Rwanda for many years, they had never again on all the memorial sites. I wanted to say to them, yeah, familiar, we had never again on all our, ceremonies for many years. So, Irene Klaas is a survivor of the Warsaw Ghetto. She volunteers at our center. Zevian Gabo is a survivor from Rwanda, and the first time she met him, and she told him her story, he said, "What? It happened to you, and then it happened to me. He lost all his family. The world never learned? No, the world never learned." So these sort of connections are very, very important. And the last one is really the very famous words that I would like to end with. So why do we do all this work here in Australia and in South Africa? Why do we try to make a connection between the past, 70 years ago in another continent, or the past 22 years ago, 23 years ago in another country, to today? Why are we trying to do that? And Michael Berenbaum, that was here, used a true story of a prisoner in Sachsenhausen concentration camp that was an old prisoner. He was there for a long time, and whenever new prisoners came to Sachsenhausen, he would tell them everything, how they're killing and how you try to get, stay alive, and about everything in the camp. And he used to end his preparation to these newcomers by saying those words: "I have told you this story not to weaken you, but to strengthen you. The rest is up to you." And I believe it is up to all of us that are doing this work. And actually, I would extend it and say it's up to all of us here in the room to try and make sense from the history and make connections to today and to the future of our children and grandchildren. I would love to have a conversation, if you do have the time. We have probably 25 minutes or so to just have questions, comments, stories, anything. I'm very open and would love to have a conversation. I know you, Brenny.
What do you say to people that say, the Holocaust was 70 years ago, let's leave it, what happened? How do you answer that?
And you do have that.
Yeah.
I don't know if you have it in Australia, but you do have that. And, first of all, because I'm really a believer that history is there to teach us, I also truly believe in saying this is the most documented atrocity, genocide, if you wish, the name, the Holocaust, the Shoah, but genocide, these. It has a lot to teach us. There are memories, testimonies that are powerful in their depth and in their wisdom and in their sharing, if we just listen. We need to listen. And, when you burn your hand in the kitchen, you hopefully will not go the next day and burn your hand in the kitchen. So you hopefully learn from your own personal history, So we as humanity should learn from our own humanity's history. And that's what I say to them. So I make it because I believe it. I really believe that the Holocaust, specifically the Holocaust, because it's so well documented, with so just need to listen. One more answer that I believe very, very much in is, I believe that in human history there are turning points in history, in humanity's history, that we learn from. So I'll give you a few examples. We learn about the French Revolution in every country in the world, even if we're not French, you know? Because it is a turning point of history. And there are few of those turning points. I truly believe that the Holocaust is a turning point in history. It shaped the way we look at humanity, at human rights, at international law. Genocide the word was born during the Holocaust by coined in 1944. The laws against genocide were born because of the Holocaust. You know, so I do think that it's a turning point in history. And that is an answer that I feel very comfortable that all of you can give. Yeah. Yes, please.
I don't want to embarrass you, but I'd like to thank you so much for what to me personally has been one of the most remarkable lectures that I've heard.
Oh, wow. Thank you. I'm excited. Thank you very much. I wasn't sure that the South African story will, but thank you.
But do you have a question, Jack?
No,
Just a comment.
No, we can chat. Yes.
So, Tali, thank you very much. I think everyone's very enlightened to hear what you've got to say. I mean, our centre is very different because you've created something that's a Holocaust and Genocide Centre, and we are, I guess, the recipients, me as the curator working here and everyone else working here, of a centre that's created by survivors. It's very much about the Holocaust. We tippy-toe into other genocides, but we're, of course, very limited as to how much we can go. And I just wanted to tell you something, which is, a few years ago we put on Leora Khan's Rescuers exhibition, and we invited a Rwandan woman to speak at the opening. And I don't know how many people were here, but it was just the most extraordinary experience because many of us have heard Holocaust survivors speak. This woman had never spoken publicly about what happened to her before, which was, in hindsight, a bit of a mistake, but her husband was meant to speak and he couldn't come. So he said she's fine, so she came, and she got up and she just started talking, and we didn't know she'd never talked about it before. And she spoke for like, I mean, someone said it was an hour, I think it was 45 minutes. And she was saying, and it was blow by blow, like then this happened, then this happened, then this happened. And I mean, and then all of a sudden it got to the end and it stopped, and we were just gobsmacked. I mean, it was really amazing. But I'm just telling you that story to say that it was strange to hear a Rwandan story here in Australia. And it was also very interesting, I think, for all of our community to hear such a different perspective. But it is a challenge for us. And in the new museum and in our future developments, we are looking a little bit more at Indigenous history and what happened to the stolen generation. So, anyway,
and already there is some, I remember from 5 years ago that you have
about William Cooper's
story,
which is fantastic.
And that's great, to bring that. And thank you for that, because, first of all, the Rwandan stories are quite, they get you. They get you because 22 years ago, and many of them were children, hey? So it's hard. Was she a child?
No,
she was a teenager or an adult.
Yeah, she was an adult.
I must say, we have also, we have some survivors, so we still have, just to share with you some other things that we do, because we do a lot of things. We do events, we do theatre, we do films. It's a very vibrant centre, so a lot is happening in the centre all the time. We just had a book launch about the First World War, and with the government of Flanders. The Japanese are working with us. Don't even ask, everyone wants to work with us. But that's very exciting, especially if they can bring some money. But actually, the Rwandan survivors that come to our centre, because we have a Holocaust survivors support group We have about 20 to 25 Holocaust survivors still in Johannesburg. The oldest is 98 years old. In 2.5 months she'll be 99, and she was from Belgium, Madeleine Heitner. She had 3 husbands. And I can tell you a lot about Madeleine Heitner. And the youngest is probably about 82. She was a child in Westerbork, a baby in Westerbork, about your age, maybe 2 years old or 3 years old. So she's sort of the youngest. But then we have a group of about 15 to 18 Rwandan survivors that also we have like a support group for the Rwandans with volunteers, social workers and psychologists that are working with them. And I would say 90% of them were children, 7, 8, 9 and 10 years old. Some were adults or teenagers. The stories, and they did not speak about it for 20 years. We filmed them. I didn't bring today a clip of a survivor story, but we made 21 films meanwhile, and we're still making. So the survivor stories are unbelievable. I'll tell you one story. Emmanuel, he was 8.5 years old in the east side of Rwanda. I think, no, you didn't. Tessa actually heard him when he spoke to the group of Australian students. He was saved by a Hutu neighbor that saved them. He kept them in his house. Then he became too dangerous, and his mother, his old mother, saved them for a little while longer. Then it became too dangerous, and they had to split and leave this Hutu neighbor. And Emmanuel and a brother went to the lake. They're next to the lakes, and his story that he's sharing is how, on the one hand, there were the killers that were coming, and he had to, hide in the trees and hide everywhere. And on the other hand, there were hippos in the lake. 40, 50 hippos in the lake that are coming during, the night and the day, and this constant day-to-day thing. Unbelievable. I'm an 8.5 years old kid that now finished Monash University, computer sciences business degree, and he's working and, unbelievable young man. With PTSD, I believe all of them, there are issues. There are issues. It was difficult 3 months, very difficult 3 months. But I recommend work with other testimonies. They are very, very, very interesting. Henry, yes, and then
Thank you. Got a bit of a sore throat. I just wanted to ask you, it was very sad that Martin Pickford passed away a few years ago. Who has actually replaced a person like that, who wrote so vividly and understanding about the Holocaust? And as an extra for that, he was a little bit scathing of Primo Levi, who was a historian. And
was a writer. Yes, was a writer. Yes.
And he couldn't take it anymore.
And committed suicide, Yeah, so the question, because Henry has a sore throat, he's asking, the sadness of scholars such as Martin Gilbert that passed away, that was writing so much, Elie Wiesel that died in July last year. You have many scholars, David Cesarani. We actually lost, we lost quite a few giants, even before that. And who is now, the keepers of memory, those writers that are writing? So first of all, we are very fortunate that there are older generations, like a Michael Berenbaum or like a Yehuda Bauer, that is just brilliant. But there are also younger generation, people that are coming up, and they are young. Many of them are not Jewish. They're German and they're Polish and they're French and they are from America and England, and they are absolutely fantastic writers and scholars. And to really actually piggyback is that it's interesting that the Holocaust now, the majority of the directors of institutions, the majority of the writers and researchers and scholars nowadays are young and not Jewish. And that is, again, to piggyback to what I said to you, it's a turning point in history. It's not only a Jewish history event anymore. It happened to Jews. The victims were Jews. But the other players, if you want, were others, were not Jews. And there were also, of course, many other victims as well. So it's interesting to see, you know, what is happening. And I think Sue and Pauline, you can tell because you're in IRA and you see it's not Jewish and they're young people. It's amazing. Kathy.
I just want to follow up on something that gentleman said as well about talking. I went on March of the Living here in 2008, and just hearing you again, and I understand why people want to work with you. It's very clear. Because when you started talking about your story in Cashel, I can't remember how I felt. The intersections of the past and the present really were kind of incredible to me. I wasn't expecting it. You were our educator and our guide, and you were an educator and historian and a child survivor. And those intersections of the past and the present really had a profound effect on me. And how I think about Holocaust history and how I think about remembrance. And just today, sitting here and reading past and present, and just thinking about those intersections, I think you know you've brought a different light to how you can make connections, not just with the past and the present, but with other parallel experiences. So I just want to acknowledge that, and also thank you for the kind of impact you've had on me personally. But I can see it's much more.
Thank you.
Because I think you've actually eloquently said everything that I was going to say. And really, Tali, we've been so privileged to have you here this evening to share what you have done, what you have created, but also making those connections. And for me personally, as many people I work with here, for those who don't know who I am standing here, my name's Lisa Phillips and I'm Director of Education here. And for me personally, being a child of South African immigrants who was actually born here in Melbourne, who left South Africa for those reasons of apartheid, my father being one on the first test case in the 1952 pass laws, that actually managed to, well, that's another story, but there are lots of connections. And so again, in the same way that you've made connections that Kathy talked about in Krakow, you've made a personal connection with me here in the audience. And I think this is something that I'm sure everyone who's witnessed, who's sat here this evening, have been really privileged to hear. Your work in South Africa is phenomenal, and I think it's inspired all of us here in Melbourne to also continue this fantastic work, because racism is rampant in our country, and I think we have a lot of work to do. Thank you so much.
Thank you.